The second chapter is a chapter on culture, and we have to ask the question of what is culture? The anthropologists define culture as the primary tool of the discipline of anthropology, which is one of the social sciences. And anthropologists define it like this. They say that culture is just about anything associated with being a human being. It includes your language, it includes your literature, it includes your clothing, it includes all of your arts, it includes all of your literature, it includes laws, customs, religion, everything. All of your artifacts, cars, automobiles, housing, all of those things. It's everything that is associated with being a person and living in the world. So there are lots of different kinds of cultures, just as there are lots of different kinds of people all over the world. And if we look at culture the way anthropologists do, they say there are different parts of culture. It has different components and it's made up of different things. Symbols, for example. The Americans use a flag, stars and stripes. Religions use different symbols. The Christians use the cross. Jews use the Star of David. Different countries have different languages, and the English speak English, the French speak French, Germans speak German. So those are one of the characteristics of culture. Not only are there symbols and language, but there are values and beliefs. The Chinese and the Japanese are very collectivistic. That is, they believe in developing their behaviors through groups. They refer to each other as family and as the community as being very, very important. Americans are highly individualistic, on the other hand, and they prize freedom and individual freedom. So their values are a bit different. There are different kinds of values. Some of them are called norms, and norms are of a different nature. Some of them are very important, and some of them are not so important. The important norms, like thou shalt not kill, that norm is a vital norm in almost all cultures, and it's called. Those are all called mores, M-O-R-E-S, mores, and the less important norms are called folkways. These are relatively unimportant things, like wearing a necktie in some cultures, or men frequently have buttons on the sleeves of their jackets. Those are just matters of style and fashion, so they're not critically important. So those kinds of norms are called folkways. There are things that all cultures prize as what ought to be rather than what is. For example, Americans prize freedom, but not all Americans are free. Some people are in jail, some people are very poor, some people are very ill, and the consequence of it, our society strives to be better than it is, and that would be our ideal. But there are characteristics of our culture which are very, very real. For example, we have over 2 million people in jail, and they're not free. But we'd like everybody to be free in our ideal culture, and maybe someday we'll achieve our ideals, but we keep trying. And then historically, there have been different kinds of cultures. All of us at one time, all over the world, all cultures, were people who had to hunt, just like the cavemen did, all over the place, or they had to gather food, just like the cavemen did. And some people on Earth still do that. They are hunters and gatherers. There are people in the Amazon basin, remote tribes, who are still hunting and gathering food. But most folks around the Earth have learned to grow food, and they've learned how to raise cattle. For example, in Africa, there are folks who learned how to plant crops, plant corn, and they raise cattle. They don't have sophisticated agriculture like we do in Europe or like we do in Canada or the United States, with machinery, machine-driven plows pulled by tractors, combines, and huge-scale agriculture. But we used machines in other ways too. For example, the first machines were largely looms associated with making clothing. and for spinning fibers together to make yarn in order to spin it to make cloth. Those first industries eventually used water power, and then later on electricity and steam to make the looms work. And those were best located in factories near the power source, near the fall line, so that you find towns like Manchester, New Hampshire, that had huge, huge mills that used the river for power in driving the looms and the spinning mechanisms for making textiles. Our towns in Massachusetts, similarly, like Fall River, you had huge, huge textile mills. You can still see them. They were built by the French primarily, stone upon gray stone, and now most of them are closed, or they've been turned into malls for discount stores. What that means is our culture has changed from industry to something else, and what that something else is called post-industrial. And the post-industrial society is powered by computers and powered by things like the internet and web services. Information is the business of the post-industrial society, just as products and commodities were the business of factories in industrial society. Then there are different kinds of cultures. There's high culture, for example, classical music is largely defined as high culture. Pop music is largely a part of popular culture. And then within any culture, there are subcultures. Being an American means that we have a culture called being an American. If you're traveling in England or Germany, people will see you as an American. They don't see you as a Texan necessarily, and they don't see you as a Bostonian. They see you as an American. But we know here in America that we've got all kinds of Americans, and some of them, for example, are Yankees who live in New England and Boston. And then within Boston, there are people who live in Southie, who are primarily Irish, or people in the North End who are primarily Italian. And those are called subcultures. They are within the larger culture of being an American. And so it is with other countries. Other countries also have subcultures. We like to think here in America that we admire different cultures. We like different kinds of food. Americans like to eat pizza, pie, and spaghetti, and they like to eat hot dogs and wursts and kielbasa and things of that sort. So we appreciate other cultures, and we like to think that we are multicultural, and we practice multiculturalism. Then there are folks who don't like our being the way things are now. A lot of young people, particularly teenagers, they don't like to dress like other folks do, like grown-ups do. So they may dress differently. They may wear their hair differently. They may dye their hair differently. They may pierce their bodies. They may use nose rings, and they may use rings in their belly buttons. They may use tattoos on their body, and as a consequence say, look, I'm different. And those folks are largely what is called members of a counterculture. Back in the 1960s, counterculturalism was a big movement. Part of it was against the war in Vietnam. Part of it also was popular music and popular clothing and hairdressing. And people who were part of the counterculture were regarded as hippies. And today there still is a counterculture. As I said, lots of young people belong to a counterculture. Also, lastly, in dealing with culture in that chapter, you deal with the question of what's called ethnocentrism. And ethnocentrism means that you think that your culture, your particular culture, is the best one of all, and all the others are no good. For example, there's a bumper sticker in Massachusetts that says Southie is number one. What that means is that you appreciate being from South Boston, and that South Boston is better than any other place in the world. And that's an ethnocentric position, in that folks who live in Southie who believe that, not everybody who lives in Southie believes that, but those who do are ethnocentric. That is, they think they're number one, and everybody else is less than that. Anthropologists and sociologists can't be ethnocentric. They cannot see themselves at the center of their ethnicity, ethnicity being their nationality or the cultural group to which they belong. They can't be self-centered, so they can't be ethnocentric. They are what are called cultural relativists. That means they can look at any culture, any place in the world, and look at it with an open mind and an open heart and non-judgmentally, so that they can study it as clearly as possible without prejudice. Cultural relativism is something that grew out of the social sciences. I think that's about all I want to say about that chapter. I hope you enjoy it, because it can be a lot of fun.